My parents never bothered to use my real name. From the time I was little, I was simply the dumb one to them, like that label was stitched onto me before I even had a chance to prove otherwise. My brother Lucas, on the other hand, was treated like a prince. In their eyes, he was the prodigy, the shining star of the Mercer family. He'd earned a full scholarship to Harvard, and my parents made sure the whole world knew it. At his graduation, my dad stood proudly before a crowd of guests, boasting about the empire Lucas would someday run. He made a grand promise right there. Lucas would inherit the family's $75 million business, get a brand new Tesla, and take ownership of our $13 million New York mansion. The applause sounded more like cheers at a coronation. I sat in the back, unnoticed, swallowing the sting of humiliation and silently wondering how I'd ever step out of the shadow they built around me. That's when something unexpected happened. A man I'd never seen before approached me, leaned close, slipped a thick white envelope into my hand, and whispered, "It's time to tell them who you really are." In that instant, everything I believed about myself and everything my family assumed was about to be shaken to its core. Growing up, love in our house was like a prize. You had to earn it, and Lucas was the only one who ever did. My father, Adrian Mercer, made the family hierarchy clear early on. Lucas was the golden child, the prodigy meant to carry the Mercer name forward. I was the extra piece that never quite fit. At family dinners, the arrangement never changed. My father sat at the head of the long mahogany table, Lucas proudly to his right, my mother Celine beside him, glowing each time Lucas spoke. My seat was at the far end, distant and easy to ignore. By the time I tried to join a conversation, it had already moved past me. I learned quickly that silence was safer than the eye rolls that followed my words. My father had a gift for tearing me down with just a sentence. I still remember one dinner when I was 14. Lucas had announced his acceptance into an elite science program, and the table exploded with applause. My dad raised his glass and declared, "This is what it means to be a Mercer. Excellence, leadership, brilliance." Then he glanced my way with a faint smirk. "And you, Miles, past gym class. We should be thankful for the little things." Laughter filled the room. Even my mother let out a soft chuckle, the kind that said she knew it was cruel but couldn't stop herself. The words hurt less than the fact that they genuinely couldn't imagine me being anything more. My mother often made quiet comparisons when she thought no one else was paying attention. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" She'd ask casually while handing me a plate or passing laundry. Her voice was calm, almost indifferent, but each comment sank into me like a stone disappearing into deep water. Lucas flourished in that environment. Being the favorite came naturally to him. Tall, sharp-featured, and full of confidence, he carried himself like the world already belonged to him. He never missed a chance to remind me of my place. When I was 16, I picked up a part-time job at a diner to save for my own things. One evening, as I was leaving for work, Lucas looked up from the living room couch, where he sat basking in our parents' praise and smirked. "Don't forget to wipe the grease off your hands before touching the door. We wouldn't want the neighbors thinking the Mercers keep a servant." My parents laughed, amused by his cruelty. I walked out pretending it didn't matter, but every jab like that carved away at me bit by bit. The only person who saw me differently was my grandfather, Travis Mercer. He had built the family company from nothing, turning it into the empire my father now controlled. Travis wasn't loud or boastful like the rest. He was thoughtful, gentle, and cared more about people than profit. When I visited him, he never grilled me about grades or demanded achievements. Instead, he asked about my thoughts, my goals, and what made me happy. One quiet afternoon on his porch, he leaned closer and said, "Miles, don't confuse their blindness with the truth. You have something Lucas doesn't. One day, when the time comes, you'll understand. Don't let them make you doubt it." His words lingered with me for years, even if I didn't fully grasp their weight back then. In that house, I felt like I was stuck in a game I wasn't allowed to win. My father molded Lucas for greatness like a general shaping his best soldier. He brought him into business meetings as a teenager, let him watch negotiations, and told everyone Lucas was the future of the Mercer name. I was never invited to any of it. My role was to mow the lawn, run errands, or stay out of sight. I was treated like a background character in my own family story. As we grew older, the gap between us widened. Lucas's Harvard acceptance was treated like a national celebration. My mom threw a party that night, with catered food and champagne. Strangers congratulated me as if I shared in his glory, but behind my polite nods, I felt like I didn't exist outside of being Lucas's brother. At 19, I finally understood that I'd never get love or approval from my parents. So I started building a life for myself in quiet ways. I juggled multiple part-time jobs, saved every dollar I could, and created small bits of independence they never noticed. While Lucas came back from his summers abroad with stories of Europe, I spent mine stacking boxes in warehouses and scrubbing dishes in kitchens. They dismissed my efforts as meaningless, never realizing I was slowly building a kind of strength they couldn't see. Every family gathering felt like carrying a weight I couldn't shake. My father's voice echoed in my mind like a sentence carved into stone. "Miles, you'll never amount to anything." My mother's tired sighs seemed to follow me down every hallway, and Lucas's easy laughter reminded me daily how effortless his life was compared to mine. By the time his graduation neared, I'd already built a wall inside myself, preparing for the embarrassment I knew was coming. It was never a matter of if they'd glorify him again, only how far they'd take it this time and how public my humiliation would be. I braced myself to sit quietly, to bite my tongue while they lifted Lucas up like the crown jewel of the Mercer name. What I didn't know was that the life they'd forced on me, one filled with shadows and silence, was about to collide with a truth that would shake everything they believed. The envelope I received that day would turn my grandfather's words into prophecy, and my quiet compliance would finally reach its limit. Lucas's graduation day wasn't a celebration, it was a production. From the moment I opened my eyes, my parents treated it like the most important event in our family's history. My mother, Celine, darted through the house barking orders at the staff about flowers, catering, and guest lists. My father, Adrian, stood polished in the foyer, adjusting his cufflinks and rehearsing his speech for the hundreds of guests he'd invited. My role in all this was simple: keep quiet and stay out of the way. They handed me one of Lucas's old suits, altered just enough to fit me. My assigned seat at the ceremony was buried in the far back rows. From there, I watched him stride across the stage, his graduation gown flowing as the crowd roared at the sound of his name. My parents rose to their feet, clapping proudly while my father's chest puffed up like he'd accomplished the achievement himself. I clapped too, though every motion felt forced. My hands were heavy, my stomach knotted tight. And when the ceremony ended, the real display began. Our family threw a massive reception in a high-end New York ballroom. Golden light reflected off polished wood floors, and chandeliers lit the room like a royal gala. Outside, a line of valets welcomed a parade of luxury cars. Politicians, business magnates, and family friends filed in wearing tuxedos and gowns, here not just to celebrate Lucas, but to witness his formal inheritance. I tried to blend into the background, standing near a wall half hidden behind towering vases of white lilies. My presence felt more like a formality than an inclusion. People glanced my way with polite indifference. Some whispered, "That must be the other son," like I was a side note in a story that didn't belong to me. Then came the moment I dreaded. My father took the stage, microphone in hand, his voice booming through the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight to honor my brilliant son, Lucas Mercer." The crowd erupted again, and Lucas stood near the front, smiling the confident smile he'd perfected his whole life. Adrian's voice grew louder, more theatrical. "As many of you know, the Mercer family has built more than a company. We've built a legacy, and tonight, I'm proud to announce that Lucas will carry that legacy forward. The $75 million company, the Tesla Model X parked outside, and the $13 million New York mansion will all be his. He is the future of our family, and I could not be prouder." Applause thundered through the room. Glasses clinked. Cheers rose like waves. I sat frozen in my chair at the back, my heart sinking with each sound. My mother leaned into my father, her face glowing with satisfaction. Her hand rested on his arm as if to say, "We did it. Our perfect son has everything." For a split second, Lucas's eyes met mine. He raised his champagne glass toward me, but it wasn't a toast of inclusion. The smirk on his face was sharp, mocking. His message was clear without a word. "I've won. You've lost." I wanted to vanish. The humiliation weighed heavier than ever. All the years of unnoticed effort, of lonely nights spent hoping for a sliver of recognition, shattered in that moment. My father's public declaration had crushed any lingering dream that they might one day see me differently. As the room celebrated Lucas, my mother passed by me on her way to the stage. She paused just long enough to whisper, her voice low and cutting, "At least don't ruin this day for your brother. Keep to yourself." Then she walked off smiling, reaching for Lucas's hand as if I'd never been there. The toasts went on, the speeches grew louder, and I stayed seated, fists clenched under the table, holding myself together through sheer will. Anger and grief churned inside me like a storm with nowhere to go. I thought of my grandfather Travis, the only person who'd ever spoken to me like I mattered. His voice replayed in my head. "One day, the truth will set you free." But in that moment, I couldn't see any truth that would change this. My parents had made their choice long ago. Lucas wore the crown, and I was the forgotten son, left to fade into the corners of the room while they basked in the glow. The divide between us had never been clearer. This wasn't just exclusion anymore, it was erasure. My father had announced it to the world, and the applause that followed felt like nails sealing my fate shut. I sat there convinced that silence was all I had left, that this day, like every other before it, would end with me enduring quietly while they celebrated loudly. I couldn't have predicted that this night, the one I'd dreaded for months, would bring something I never saw coming. It happened just after the applause died down and the music began to play again. That's when I noticed him. A man in a dark suit was cutting through the crowd toward me. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't smiling. In his hand, he carried something, and his eyes were locked on me alone. He moved with purpose, unaffected by the laughter, the music, or the celebration swirling around him. Even before he reached my table, I felt a strange tension in the air. He was tall, sharp-featured, and carried himself like someone who didn't waste time. He stopped beside me, leaned down, placed a thick, white envelope on the table, and whispered into my ear in a low, deliberate tone, "It's time to tell them who you really are." Before I could react, he straightened his jacket, gave a brief nod, and disappeared back into the crowd as suddenly as he'd arrived. I sat there frozen, staring at the envelope resting on the polished wood. My fingers hovered above it, trembling. For years, I'd been ignored, mocked, and dismissed, but never had anyone hinted that there might be more to my story than the version my family had written. I slid the envelope into my lap, shielding it from view, my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. For a moment, I considered leaving quietly. I could have slipped out before anyone noticed. But his words repeated in my mind. "Who you really are. What could that possibly mean?" On stage, Lucas now stood proudly beside my father, soaking up congratulations from guests. Their voices blurred into background noise as my focus narrowed to the sealed envelope. I slid a finger under the flap, hesitating. Part of me feared it was a cruel trick, another way for life to remind me of my place. But another part, the one that still remembered my grandfather's faith in me, pushed forward. I tore the seal and opened it. Inside were several official-looking documents and a folded handwritten letter. The papers were stamped and signed. My eyes darted across the first page, and I froze when I saw my name. Not scribbled as an afterthought, not used to mock me, but printed in clear legal terms, Miles Mercer. The contents detailed ownership stakes in the Mercer Company, control of the New York Mansions Trust, and multiple accounts I hadn't even known existed, all under my name. The final page was a transfer of authority signed years earlier by my grandfather, Travis Mercer. My hands shook as I unfolded the letter. The handwriting was instantly familiar, steady, deliberate, my grandfather's. "Miles, if you're reading this, the time has come. I watched you and Lucas grow, and I knew early that this family's future could not rest on arrogance or pride. I chose you because you understand humility. You know what it means to endure without recognition. You see people for who they are, not what they can give you. Don't doubt yourself any longer. Everything I built belongs to you." I stared at those words until my vision blurred. My grandfather hadn't chosen Lucas. He hadn't chosen my father. He had chosen me. For years, I'd let their cruelty shape how I saw myself. But here was undeniable proof that the man who built everything had seen me differently all along. My chest tightened with a rush of disbelief and defiance. I wanted to stand up and announce the truth right then, but fear rooted me in place. My father commanded the room, his reputation larger than life. Challenging him publicly meant setting off a storm I couldn't control. The Mercer name carried power, and Adrian Mercer had always wielded that power like a weapon. Then I thought of every moment that had led here. My father's smirks, my mother's dismissive whispers, Lucas's cruel jokes, and the endless nights I'd spent trying to be seen. I'd spent my entire life letting them define me. The envelope wasn't just paper. It was a key, a way out, freedom. I closed the folder, slipped it inside my jacket, and pressed it against my chest. My decision was clear. I wouldn't stay silent anymore. Not tonight. Not again. As another toast began, the music softened, and glasses rose in Lucas's honor. I stood slowly, my legs unsteady but my resolve like steel. For the first time in my life, I felt taller than the weight they'd piled on me. As I walked toward the stage, heads began to turn. My father's eyes caught mine, his expression darkening with irritation. Lucas's smirk widened, assuming I was there to play the obedient little brother and publicly congratulate him. My mother shook her head slightly, a silent warning. But my grandfather's voice echoed in my mind. One day, the truth will set you free. This was that day. I climbed the stage steps, my pulse racing, fists clenched. My father leaned toward the microphone with a strained smile and hissed under his breath. "Miles, this isn't your moment." I didn't back down. My voice shook at first, but gained strength with every word. "Actually, Father, this moment belongs to me." The entire room fell silent. Guests froze mid-toast, champagne glasses suspended in the air. Lucas's grin faltered. My father's eyes narrowed like blades. I reached inside my jacket and gripped the envelope. Hundreds of eyes were locked on me. The silence was heavier than any sound. Standing at the edge of the stage, with the truth pressed against my chest, I knew there was no turning back. My father's jaw tightened as he stepped closer, his tone sharp but controlled. "Miles, step down. You're making a fool of yourself." For most of my life, I'd followed orders like that without hesitation. I'd learned to fade into the background whenever they decided I didn't belong. But this night was different. My hand shook slightly as I pulled the papers from my jacket and raised them high for everyone to see. "I'm not the one embarrassing myself," I said, louder than I expected. "You are." A wave of gasps swept through the crowd. Lucas forced a laugh, lifting his glass again. "What's this? Sit down before you make this worse." I ignored him, opening the envelope and unfolding the documents for everyone to witness. Under the ballroom lights, the Mercer Company seal gleamed like a challenge. "These are official transfer agreements signed by Travis Mercer," I announced, my voice growing steadier with each word. "He didn't choose you, Lucas. And he didn't choose you either, Father. He chose me. Years ago." The room exploded into whispers and stunned silence. Some guests craned their necks to get a better look. Others exchanged uneasy glances. Adrian lunged forward, his face reddening. "This is nonsense." The old man was confused. He didn't know what he was signing. Before he could snatch the papers from me, a deep, steady voice cut through the noise. I knew exactly what I was doing. Every head turned as my grandfather, Travis Mercer, slowly pushed himself up from a chair near the front. His cane tapped rhythmically against the polished floor as he made his way toward the stage. Age had bent his body, but not his authority. When he reached me, he placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "I entrusted these documents to someone I could count on," he said. "The time to deliver them is now. I chose Miles because I've watched both of my grandsons grow. Lucas, you're brilliant, but brilliance without humility turns into arrogance. Adrian, you built wealth but lost compassion. Miles has endured neglect and cruelty, yet he never let bitterness take over. He sees the value in people, not just their power. That's why he will lead." The room reacted with louder gasps and a swell of murmurs. Lucas's face went pale, his confident grin slipping away. "Grandfather, you can't mean that," Lucas stammered. "I've done everything to make you proud. I've achieved more than he ever could." Travis looked at him with quiet sorrow. "You've achieved for yourself, Lucas. That's not leadership. That's vanity." Adrian spun toward his father, desperation rising in his voice. "You'd hand everything to the boy who failed? The one who never lived up to our name?" "I'm giving it to the man who will redefine what the Mercer name stands for," Travis answered coldly. Silence fell over the room. Even the chandeliers seemed to hold their breath. For the first time in my life, I felt the power of being truly seen, not as their disappointment, but as the rightful heir to something far greater than money. I turned to face the crowd, and my hands didn't shake anymore. All my life, I was told I was nothing, that I'd never measure up, I said, my voice carrying through the stillness. You heard my father say it again tonight. But now you can see the truth for yourselves. My grandfather believed in me when no one else did. And I won't waste what he's entrusted to me. I'll honor this family's legacy by building people, not just profit. Applause started slowly, a few hesitant claps at first, then grew louder until it filled the ballroom. The silence that had once suffocated me was gone. My father's face burned red, but he had nothing left to say. My mother's smile faltered, her lips trembling as the perfect image she'd built began to crack. Lucas stood frozen, his glass still raised, as if time had abandoned him. At the back of the room, the stranger who had delivered the envelope appeared again. He met my eyes, gave a single approving nod, and slipped away into the crowd. A rush of clarity hit me. This wasn't just about wealth or power. It was about finally breaking the chains that had held me since childhood. Every cruel word, every moment of humiliation had led to this night. I turned to my grandfather and lowered my head slightly. Thank you for believing in me. He squeezed my shoulder. Now show them why I was right. When I looked back at the crowd, I no longer saw judges waiting to condemn me. I saw witnesses to the end of the story they had forced on me, and the beginning of the one I would write myself. For the first time, Lucas couldn't meet my gaze. The smirk he'd always worn was gone, replaced by something new. Fear. Under the glare of the chandeliers, it hit me. I had never been the fool. I had just been waiting for the right moment to show them who I truly was. As the applause faded into murmurs, the weight of the night settled over the room. My father's fists clenched at his sides. His voice came out low and bitter. This isn't over. You don't know what you've started, Miles. He spun on his heel and stormed out, his footsteps echoing like gunshots. My mother followed, avoiding my eyes, her face pale beneath layers of makeup. The flawless image she'd spent a lifetime crafting had shattered in a single night. Lucas stayed behind, rigid, his knuckles white around his glass. He stared at me with a mix of disbelief and fury, as if I'd stolen something that was rightfully his. You don't deserve this, he hissed. You're nothing compared to me. I met his stare without flinching. Maybe I'm not what you think I should be, but I'm exactly who grandfather believed I could become. And that's enough. The look in his eyes confirmed what I'd suspected. He wasn't angry anymore. He was afraid. He was afraid because the ground that propped up his ego had finally given way. My grandfather stood taller than I'd seen him in years. He leaned on his cane, but his voice carried the authority of a man who still commanded the room. This family changes tonight, he declared. The company is finally in the hands of someone who understands what it feels like to be unseen. Miles, the weight of this legacy is yours now, but so is its promise. His words hit me hard, both frightening and exhilarating. I understood the road ahead would be rough. Taking control of a multi-million-dollar company wasn't a simple inheritance. It was a test of everything I'd become. But for the first time, I felt ready. Not to settle old scores or prove my family wrong, but to live up to the trust my grandfather had placed in me. The applause that followed was different from before. It wasn't for Lucas or Adrian. It was for me. The sound rose through the ballroom like a tide washing away years of silence and doubt. I lifted my chin, no longer shrinking beneath their shadows. Later that night, after the crowd drifted home and the chandeliers dimmed to a soft glow, I slipped outside. Cool New York air rushed against my face. The city lights stretched out like a sea of stars, and for so many years I'd looked at them as if they belonged to a world that had no space for me. But now they felt like a promise, something I had finally claimed as my own. I thought back to the boy I used to be, the one sitting alone at the far end of the table, ignored and ridiculed. I remembered the nights I believed their cruelty, convincing myself I truly was nothing. And then I thought of the man I was becoming, standing here with the truth in my hands, finally free from the prison they built around me. The lesson was clear. Being underestimated doesn't determine your value. Harsh judgments can become the very fire that shapes unexpected strength. The labels people slap on you don't control your destiny. What matters is the truth you carry inside, and whether you have the courage to stand up when your moment arrives. My grandfather joined me outside, resting a steady hand on my shoulder. You see it now, don't you? He asked quietly. I do, I said. I see it clearly. A faint smile crossed his face, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. Then carry it well. The future is yours. I took a deep breath, letting the cold night air fill my lungs. All the fear, the shame, the years of invisibility, they no longer owned me. I wasn't the fool they'd painted me as. I was the heir, not chosen for perfection, but for resilience, for heart, for the strength that had been forged in silence. And if you're hearing my story now, I want to leave you with this. If you've ever been underestimated, pushed aside, or made to feel small, remember this moment. Your worth isn't decided by the voices that try to bury you. Your time will come, and when it does, the truth inside you will speak louder than any insult ever could. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If it made you reflect on your own life, or someone you care about, share it with them. Tell me in the comments what part stuck with you most. And if you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel.